Everybody that's listening to us, whether it's YouTube, the podcasting sites, please subscribe, share this interview. If you're listening to us on the radio stations, we appreciate that. Obviously, you can't subscribe or share. Maybe in another 40 years, you can probably do that, but not right now. Anyways, we'll move on. We have a special guest today, and he's going to be on a couple of times because he's got quite the family story. This is David Dorazi. Again, if you want to find more about David, look into the books, get the books. It's David FDorazi.com. Again, we'll read it one more time. It's DavidFDorazi.com. Dave, it's a pleasure to meet you, first of all, and I'm so excited to do this interview and the many more that we're going to do after this. So thanks so much for coming on the program.
Well, thanks, Rob. I'm really excited about it. Excited about everything's going on, and I'm excited to be here.
As we go into the first question in the interview, let's talk about this. Tell the viewers and the listeners, I should say, too, a little bit about you, why you decided to write the book, Is Everybody Happy? The Life of Kathy O'Dear.
Okay, well, that's a great question, Rob. The reason I started writing the book is I was real close to my sister, and it was about 14 years ago she passed, and I was cleaning out her apartment, and I know she saved things, and she saved all these journals and scrapbooks, which she had a ton of them. It's interesting. My dad used to do that too, and I never really saw any of it. So she had all those photos in there of her, when she was a Hollywood starlet and a star in Hollywood on the movie Happy Days, Brady Bunch, and, movies with Ronnie Howard, Eat My Dust, Kojak. She was on Bronx. She's on a lot of different shows, made commercials. So I got into it, and I got deep into it, and I found these journals that she wrote about her early childhood and everything she experienced. And I thought, but then, she had a traumatic experience when she was like 18. And so I looked at it and I says, I'd already written my dad's book, but I thought she was something special. And I think, because after this COVID thing, and people are really talking about mental illness, they could kind of visualize the story of my sister, how she could have been a superstar. And I think I just wanted to let people know she was at one time, and she was on top of it. And then all of a sudden things change. We just never know in life what's going to happen. So my goal was, I had this little cabin in the mountains, and I just really, every weekend I went up there, and I kept writing and figured this would be a great story, so people could really, if they have anybody in their family, they could read it and get a lot out of it.
So let's talk about Kathy's story, Dave. Growing up, and I know, because I've watched other interviews you've been on, and you talk about your mom was a beautiful woman. Did she push Kathy into being a child star? Was Kathy involved in this earlier on, or how did that all play out?
Great question. Yeah, my mom was, like you said, she's a beautiful woman, and everybody could attest to that by seeing pictures of her. And my dad was a very jealous guy, and they were after my dad on his TV shows. They wanted my mom to be in the movies, and she always wanted to be in the movies. So it's like, I bet a lot of women out there, in those days, the women didn't have the opportunity probably now that they had to be career. My dad wanted to be the guy. And basically, what happened was, from the age of 3, my mom heard about this acting class in Hollywood that, Mark Hamill, some of the day stars on TV, Days of Our Lives, General Hospital, they all went there. And she took her there since she was 3. Kathy was an amazing dancer. She was, she became a really good actress. And, my mom took her there 2-3 times a week, and she really got good. And she was pretty too, as you can see from the cover of the book. And so, at 10, she was going strong. And my mom decided it's time to get her an agent.
Yeah.
Well, she got the Dorothy Otis Agency, was still one of the biggest for child stars in Hollywood. And then it's where it all began. She was got her first break on the Banana Splits Adventure Hour. And that was that, I mean, you know, she's one of the 7 chosen Sour Grape Girls by, and then Richard Donner, the director for Lethal Weapon and Superman, he helped get her that part. And from there on, he stuck with her and helped her through the years. But that's why my sister got into it. My mom kind of relived the life she would have loved to live. I guess that's what I'm getting at. So, you know, and you can see it, you know, when you hear more of the story, and I think you could see it. It put a toll on her. Let's put it that way.
You know, we go back, and as people that, you know, as the country, as far as America, we know we have people that listen around the world and around the country, but specifically America, when we see all these celebrity child stars that grow up, and a lot of them, for the most part, do have problems, whether it's drugs, drinking. Also, there's issues with mental health. Do you feel like that could have been an issue? Because, you know, you look at girls now, it's everything sexualized. But back then, it was still sexualized, and there was very much of a push on, you got to have the blonde hair, the blue eyes, or you got to have be extremely skinny, almost to the point of anorexia or bulimia. So was that an issue you feel like that could have played into the mental illness of your sister?
I think that you've got a good point there. I mean, I remember, you know, growing up with her, my mom was on her case all the time to keep her weight down. And, you know, I mean, that was the most important thing. And she had to have her hair, you know, blonde, because in those days, brunettes weren't that, it was a blonde thing in that era, you know? So, I mean, she had a lot of pressure in that. And, you know, my sister complained about, she just felt that she couldn't really live her life. Like, you know, you look back at the stars in life, like Elvis and all, and, you know, the big stars, they don't have a life of their own. And so my sister, can you imagine, she's on the cover of TV Guide when she's 16, and it's like everyone in her school looks like she's a goddess, you know? It's like, oh my gosh, you know, and they were jealous, and that pressure. And my mom was very protective of her because she knew she was a pretty gal, and she got a lot of looks, and, you know, but she, after 16, she struggled with it. And, you know, Kathy managed up until the age of 20 plus, but, you know, things happen.
You know, for people listening, again, David Dorazi here on Fire Breathing Rob. It's David FDORAZI.com. Definitely check it out. And again, for people listening, the books are on there. We're talking about one today. We're going to be talking about the other one coming up in not just a moment. I would say next show, we'll just say to be safe. Again, as David's been speaking, I should say the books are both on. One's on one side, one's on the other. If you're watching, if you're not and you're listening, it's Is Everybody Happy? It's the untold story of Kathy O'Dare. Definitely check those out. Let's kick this around, David, because I want to get deeper into this. So, you know, you're growing up as a guy, and then she's over there really making a big name for herself at a young age. I know you said you guys got along fairly well. You know, how did that relationship really play out? Because most guys, I'll tell you what, whether it was my brother or my sister, if they're getting all the attention, all the looks, and they're, you know, extremely well known, I would kind of get a little bit jealous. I think anybody with some brains, even if they love their sister or their brother, would get a little jealous. So how did the relationship, was it always good? Was it sometimes good, sometimes bad?
You know, I've heard, and you know, I'm married and on my second marriage and everything, but I could see that, yeah, that friction occurs. But for some reason, I guess with all the things going on in my family, my sister and I became really close, and we really never fought. You know, I mean, and her sense of humor and my sense of humor, I guess that's how we survived. And it shows, you know, what I wrote about, what she wrote about, she'd always laugh. And I mean, I think what it was, we never felt competitive with each other, because I was going to one direction. I was in sports. She was doing her thing. You know, I was, you know, and I got a lot of accolades in sports. I was voted the most inspirational player. I played baseball, football, swimming. I mean, so I got a lot of attention there, and I liked it. And I thought I was going to grow up and be a dentist, which didn't occur. But I'm doing fine. And basically, that's pretty much how it happened. In other words, and I think we were real tight around the holidays, our family. But it is unusual. You're right. I mean, she was the only girl, and I was always tight with her. And I don't know how to explain it. I think family love, close knit. We did things on holidays. We were kind of a tight family. We had a lot of things going on within the family when I was growing up. So
I want to hit a
kind
couple
of held it
audience.
together.
Oh, no, that's
I'm sorry.
great. No, you're fine. I want to get in some audience questions and even some of the, in between, I should say, some of the questions that I'm inserting myself. We talk about audience questions here. One of the viewers wants to talk about Happy Days. That was a show that was extremely popular at the time. I've heard of it. I've watched it. A lot of people listening to this with the millennials and the younger Gen Z crowd don't know much about Happy Days. They should, because in my opinion, the older TV shows are way better than the junk that's on TV now, my opinion. Besides the point, can you tell the viewers that don't know much about Happy Days and the other roles that she really starred in a little bit about those?
Okay, sure. Well, Happy Days, was kind of after Grease, the movie with Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. So they went into this, and they had this pilot. And Kathy, my sister, at the age of 16, she was interviewed out of 400 girls, and she was chosen to be on the pilot with Ronnie Howard as the leading star and the Fonz. And if you ever watched it, it was one of the #1 rated shows, sitcom for like 8 to 10 years. And it kind of was, the offshoot of how successful Henry Winkler was. And, a lot of different characters got their own show, and then what's interesting, it's kind of like it came out. And I thought about it when I wrote the book. Jody was on Happy Days, and she also struggled with mental illness towards the end there before she passed. And I guess there's a lot of stress. But as far as when she was on the Brady Bunch, she got that part in 75, 76, and she was cast as the next Marilyn Monroe. And she, that was interesting. So, and then, she was in the movie Eat My Dust in 76 with Ronnie Howard. That was one of the, the crazy, like Fast and Furious movies. And then she was on, the Banana Splitch Adventure Hour, like I'd mentioned, the Sour Grape Girl when she's 11, made commercials for Pert Shampoo. But, if she would have been born in this stage of the game, I can imagine if she would have stayed healthy. And then, like in the book, I wrote that, Gary Marshall looked at her when she was on the set, and he said, "Hey, Kathy," he says, "man, you're beautiful. You're going to be a big Hollywood star if you could keep your health." And it just upset my mom so much. I'll never forget it. She couldn't get it over to it the day she died. It really bothered her. And, maybe he saw something. I don't know, because he probably saw a lot of people. I was thinking if she would have been a star of, a Pretty Woman, she might have got that part instead of Julia Roberts. Who knows? But anyway, that's kind of that. She was a superstar in her day, and she was treated like one anytime she was on the set and the interviews. And, she's got a lot of friends. She was real buddies with Mark Hamill from Star Wars. They went to the same acting school, and, they did some things together. It was kind of fun, and the Brady Bunch kids. So I guess that's kind of where it all happened. And those were the awesome years of her life. But in the latter years, I tried to make the most of it and make them better for her. And, it was a good life.
When did you start seeing mental health issues in your family? Was it with your dad, and then it started out? We hear about that this is hereditary. Not sure if that's correct or not. You may know more about this than me. But talk about it from that aspect.
Yeah, well, the first time I recognized it, and I didn't even know what I recognized, I was standing on the porch, and when I was like 7 years old, my dad got in a terrible accident, and he had anyway, he had a nervous breakdown, and I saw him taken away in a straitjacket. And I asked my mom, I said, what's up? And she said, oh, don't worry about it. He's going to be okay. And he was gone for 6 months. So when he got home, I learned and I figure out what's going on at the age of 7. I mean, I got a grandson right now at 7. I can imagine. I was 7 and I can still remember this. And it's like 6 months later, he came home and, depressed, manic, up and down. And that's my first feel of it. And then I became a big part of that throughout the rest of his life. And that's how it all started.
As we put the exclamation point on this interview, for people that are just tuning in, it's David Dorazi. It is David. Obviously, people know how to spell that, we hope. It's DavidFDorazi.com. All right. Again, so David, as we go to the end, what do you hope people learn from our interview today about the book?
I really hope from the book they realize in life, if you have family that suffers from mental illnesses or have friends, they could see that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Everybody tries to be in denial if you have family and friends like this, because life goes so fast. You figure you're having a hard enough time dealing with your life, but it doesn't take much. I mean, if you really focus on if you have somebody that you love and you want to make sure that they get better or help them get better, you can. There's so many organizations out there. I mean, I found out from a friend about the organization that helped me enable my sister to have some type of life and home during the latter part of her life. And I saw her every couple of weeks, and I was there. I talked to her at least once a week and talked to her about what's going on to keep them. It's just like older people, like older people, if they don't have anybody to talk to, and, she's in these places with all these people, they're medicated and they really don't know what's going on, to put it in a nice way. So, I mean, to put them in touch with reality, it makes such a big difference. I mean, I used to go there and engage with her. We used to laugh. We used to, we'd go sit there. I'd try to eat a meal with her every couple of weeks, get her out of her where she was in a halfway assisted living place. And it's funny. It made my life better too, just being with her and kind of supporting her. And, there are organizations that help you, but I think the main thing is, don't turn your back to them. I mean, help them. And that's what I hope people will get out of this. It's not a dead end street. And I mean, it's a feel good story about mental illness. That's what I wanted to get out there.
So what's next for you, David?
What's next for me? I'm working on, I don't know if I mentioned to you, I've been in the sales for like over 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. I've been the top 2% of sales of every big corporation. I worked for Merck Pharmaceutical, was the #1 in the company across the country. I was there for 16 years. And then, the last company, and then I'm kind of independent now, consultant, doing just as well as I did back then. But the other corporation I was with, I was in the top 2% for another 18 years. So what I'm going to do is from everything I learned from being around my sister, being able to help her, listening, and all the successes that I've had in the career that I've chosen in life, I want to share that with people. It's not going to be like a Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Dennis Waitley, Wayne Dyer. I'm going to tell them what it took and what I did. And I think just the average blue collar guy could make it happen if he really finds that niche. And that I'm excited about it. My kids told me, Dad, your best book's going to be your next one. So that's where I'm at. That's where my head's at right now. I've already started it.
So you're already starting on writing another book then?
Yes, it's going to be called How to Be at the Top 2% in Sales, no matter what company you work for.
All right. Well, very good. Well, keep us updated. Like I said, this is not the last time you're going to be on. As we come to a close here, just tell the people. I know we've been teasing the website and where they can get the book. Is there any other place where they can follow you, whether it's a social media or Twitter, Facebook, anything?
Yeah, they could follow on Twitter. It's David F. Dorazi. They could follow on all those at Facebook. They could follow Instagram. I'm on all of those, David F. Dorazi, So, I mean, they could look me up, and I try to put little blurbs in there once in a while and kind of analyze things and give them some tips on how to deal with what I see in life or what's going on in the world as far as mental illness. It's such a big topic right now. I mean, you can see I'm going to do a book signing, and can you see that or not? No, it doesn't show.
Nah, it blares out. That's all
Yeah,
right.
okay. Anyway, it's become the #1 topic in America, since COVID. And I think everybody's got to, 3 years ago when I put out my first book about my dad, I mean, people didn't even want to hear about it or talk about it. But now it's everywhere. It's young kids. I mean, and I'm not a medical doctor, but I feel like what I know and learned from all my life experiences is going to mean so much to people that have had people that have touched them. They love family and friends. They're going to learn from it. And if that's what I end up doing through all these books, maybe not being a millionaire, but hey, if I could change one person's life, that's what I want to do.
David F. Dorazi here on Fire Breathing Rob. Definitely check him out, davidfdorazi.com. David, thanks so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Let's definitely do this again. And we got a lot to bring to the table, and we're going to get it done. So, David, thanks again for coming on the program. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Appreciate it. You have a great day.
So everybody, thanks so much for listening. If you're listening to us on one of the YouTube or the podcasting sites or Rumble for that matter, please share this interview, like it, subscribe to our channels. We really appreciate that. We're trying to bring great interviews and great people and just make it, very exciting for the listener as well. We have a special guest, returning guest, and you'll see him on the screen. He's been on before talking about his sister, and there was a book about her. David Dorazi here on Fire Breathing Rob. We're going to be talking about his second book. He's actually working on a third. We'll get into that later on in the interview. It is The In-Between Artist, and you see it on the screen. His dad is former Disney cartoonist. He's a cartoonist in his own right in general, where he's developed a lot of drawing and cartoons in general. He's done many other things too. We'll kick that around in the interview. But David Dorazi, thanks so much for coming on the program again. Greatly appreciate you coming back.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate being here.
And David, I just want to show the audience that are listening and watching. If you're watching, you can see this. I do have both of the books. I was able to get those. I'm very grateful that David did send me the book that we spoke about last time. Is Everyone Happy? About his sister, Kathy, former Happy Days celebrity. She's been in many movies too. That was a book about her. And obviously the book we're speaking about today, In-Between Artists, about David's dad. So we'll kick this around in just a moment. Again, thank you for those books. I will be getting into those in the next couple of days. But David, tell the audience that maybe this is the first time they're hearing about you. Maybe they didn't watch our other interview about Kathy. A little bit about you as we start this off.
Well, my name is David F. Dorazi. I was born and raised in a little small community of Eagle Rock, near 15 minutes from Hollywood, California. And I had a father that was a star in the 50s. And he started with Disney in 35, got working on Snow White, the longest term film in the history of Disney. And he created the character Dopey. And he talked, he shared he wrote journals about his time with Disney, about all his experiences. He struggled with mental illness along the way. He was compared to Michelangelo at one time. But as far as my background, I got the journals from both my sister and my dad. My dad's book took 6 years to write, and I condensed it into an easy read. And my sister took me 3 years. But my background, I've been in sales for many years. I attribute a lot of my success in sales to being able to help my sister and my father along the way through these mental illnesses, and managed to get my degree, go to UC Irvine, master's, and took it took it into sales world. I worked for Merck for 16 years and did very well. Worked for another big corporation, did very well. And I just want to share their stories from their journals and my memories and how it's made me a better person.
So talk about, we'll start off this. I know we're going to speak about Disney in general and, move on from there. But let's just talk about the start. So obviously you were born. Talk about your relationship growing up with your father.
Interesting. Growing up with my dad, I experienced his first breakdown when I was 7 years old. We lived in the town of Eagle Rock, and basically I was 7, and he was just at the end of his TV career. And all of a sudden, my dad went through, he would suffer from manic depression. But before all this, star on TV, radio, Emmy winner, Disney animator, all of a sudden one day they come with the white jackets, the straight jackets, and put my dad in a straight jacket when he was 7 years old. I didn't know what the heck was going on. He was a 7-year-old kid, but that's the age of reason. I asked my mom, what's going on, man? And she says, oh, don't worry about it, because he was out of control. I mean, when people are manic depressive, they're really in their high cycle. He had all these, it's kind of like a combo schizo. They have all these delusions about people breaking in the house. He's boarding up all the windows, all kinds of stuff. And so what happened was, and what brought this on, he was in a big car accident in 1956. He was T-boned. And anyway, they took him away. And, I don't remember that song, they're coming to take him away. But they took him away, and he went into Camarillo State Hospital for 6 months. He actually lost his memory. They ended up giving him, this is the first of the 4 nervous breakdowns I experienced with him.
David, was he concussed?
Huh?
Was he concussed after the car accident? Is that why he lost his memory?
Yes, correct. He was concussed for 6 months. He didn't know who I was, didn't know who my mom was. And so he was there for 6 months. So, here was 6 months. I was 7 to 7.5. And remember when I got my first communion, my dad was in the hospital. And I said to my mom, where's Dad? She says, oh, don't worry about it. But then we did get to see him once before he came home. So I saw Camarillo when it was a big state hospital in California, and all these different people running around. But he came home after 6 months. He was released. And he used to just go into his bedroom and sleep for 12 hours at a time. I mean, complete opposite. Before he went in, he would stay up all hours of the night, call people, go back and do his artwork in the studio. And, I used to go back with him before he actually completely lost it. And I'd paint with him. Those are some of the greatest memories I had. I mean, he would paint, I'd be painting next to him. Because my dad, I never knew where he was all hours of the day. He was just kind of out of control. So, little by little, he got better. And then when he got out, he was in car sales at that time. And basically he was home once in a while, Saturday nights, Sunday nights, I'd see him for dinner. And he kind of, he started getting okay. He started setting sales records. He was a great salesman. I mean, in a 57, he was the top of his grade, making all kinds of money selling cars. And then, but then on and off through the years, he had his cycles. And then when I was 14, another time it happened. He was freaking out. I had an incident with my mom. I had to break it up. And then my mom says, you got to help me. And I said, Dad, what do you want me, Mom, what do you want me to do? And she says, take him to the hospital, get him out, get him to the hospital, get him help. So anyway, I did at 14. I don't know. I talked my dad to get in the car. We went to the hospital, Las Encinas. It's still there in Pasadena. It's where all the stars go that have issues, even to this day, in Chapman Woods. And I said, man, I'll never forget just sitting with my dad there. He's looking at me and he said, David, what should I do? I said, Dad, man, I love you, man. I want you to get well. And I started crying. He started crying. Anyway, he went in, and 2 months later, he's back home again. So, I mean, it was just quite an experience growing up with a father with mental illness. And then throughout his life, between 57 and 74, I was there with them, for him, trying to help my mom with guidance. In the meantime, I managed to go to high school, most inspirational player on the football team, superstar, athlete. I kind of camouflaged it and kind of got out of that situation. Nobody knew that I was growing up in this environment, which is still very interesting.
So obviously, we just heard you speak, David, about your relationship with your father growing up. I want to go back a little bit earlier to how he got into drawing. Obviously you weren't probably alive when his love for drawing first started, but maybe that's a little bit, you can go a little bit deep. I'm sure that's in the book in general, and also how that journey of the love of art started, and also how it went into Disney and other avenues of work that he did in the past.
Yeah. Okay. It all started when he was 4 years old. His dad owned a big bar, brothel, hotel at the top and a market down below where he raised 7 kids. He was a big guy in Montana. He came from immigrants from New York, moved to Montana, a steel worker, because they were building bridges. Had some brothers from Italy. He was born in Rimini, Italy, and my grandmother was born in Republic of San Marino. And so they came out here, and at 4 years old, my dad was under a bar stool at his bar. And anyway, there was a picture of World War I on the wall, and all of a sudden he was underneath. He was drawing it and did a perfect picture of the war picture of the war, and wrote his name on it at 4. And my grandpa grabbed the picture and said, "Oh my God, this kid's amazing." Showed it around the bar and said, "I got a genius artist here." Anyway, he ended up being a genius artist throughout grammar school and high school. They couldn't, he would entertain at the theater in town with his cartooning and artwork. And then when he was a senior in high school, he went to Loyola High, and his dad asked him, he was the oldest of 11 kids, and he said, "Where do you want to go to school?" He says, "I want to go to the greatest art school in the world." And so at that time, it was American League of Art Students League of America in New York. So he got him there, and he did fantastic. He was the youngest guy on the board there, and he was compared to Michelangelo when he was 18 with the way he did hands and everything. They were just blown away. And then, he went back there for his second year, and he had some terrible incident where, anyway, it occurred. He was taken advantage of by some people, and my grandpa had to go get him. He had his first nervous breakdown, and he came back to Montana, and he actually recovered after 6 months and got back into, going back to school, get his degree. And then, in 1933, he wanted to get back into his art, and he actually did these 2 drawings, religious drawings. And he wanted to go to Chicago, get out of town. He went to Chicago and put these 2 paintings in the World's Fair in Chicago. It's the first World Fair since the war had ended. And he won first place in 2 different categories with these 2 drawings. 2 priests. He didn't have the money even to get the drawings in the World's Fair, but they gave him the money to get in because they saw him walking around with them. So then from there, he got in Chicago, radio program, #1 in Chicago, teaching kids how to draw on the radio. He became famous after. Yeah. And then what happened? He got engaged, and then his gal that he broke up with committed suicide. So he's freaking out. So he's looking in the paper, and he saw this ad where they needed in-between artists for cartooning in Hollywood. And he said, "Man, maybe that'd be a good place to do." So he gets there. They have 1,000 applicants. He's blown away. And he was one of the 4 that was picked out of 1,000 to work on Snow White. And so he was loving it, and doing very well, working on the Snow White and different things they had. He actually worked for Disney later in life too. When he was in the car business, he worked part-time. But he did very well, but he always wanted to be on and TV hadn't been out yet. So in 1948, he actually wanted to be on one of the major radio stations doing his show, teaching kids how to draw. So KHCA just happened to be down the street from Disney, so he went knocking on the door down there for a few weeks. And it's interesting how he was in an elevator, and he kind of about ready to give up. And some guy in the elevator said, "Hey, son, what are you doing?" He looked depressed. He said, "Hey, man, I'm trying to get up there to talk to the production manager of the big, KSJ radio station. He said, I can't get through. He says, well, come in Monday. He says, I'll set you up with somebody. Tell me you want to see Bill Goodwin. Oh, Bill Goodwin. Anyway, he goes there Monday, goes into Disney a little bit late, and he goes in to see this Bill Goodwin guy, and lo and behold, that's the guy he saw in the elevator. So he's sitting with him for 30 seconds. He says, hey, he says, what do you got? He says, what do you got for a show? He says, he says, really? He says, yeah, okay, I'll tell you. He says, that sounds good. Can you have a show ready by Saturday? So he ends up, my dad, he's kind of like me and my sons, man. He put it all together quick. Went back to Disney that day and talked to the big guy, Graham was his name. And he said, how come you're late, Tony? He says, well, I was just down there. I've got a radio show coming up. He says, wait a minute. He said, you got to decide. He says, you got to stick with Disney because we want all your energy towards Disney, or you have your radio show. Make your decision right now. So my dad says, this is his journey. He says, hey, man, I'm going to have my own radio show. So he walked out. And anyway, the rest was history. He won an Emmy that year on his radio show. Then he won an Emmy for his TV show. He approached KTLA, which is a nationwide station. Well, and he became the #1 hit, first cartoonist on TV. And like I said, then he had this accident that's kind of threw him off. And so he wrote in Disney, his stories about Disney were that they taught you how to do art again. I mean, they did figure drawing. You think cartooning is cartooning, but you got to know the figure exactly, because the in-betweeny, they used to call them tweenies, were the guys that before you had computers, that they had to have the pages they flipped. And but that's how it all started. My dad, and I think he was borderline genius. I mean, he wrote about in the book. He used to talk about what it was like to be in his high cycle. I mean, he was just brilliant. He spoke 5 languages. I mean, that was amazing.
Sorry, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's quite a life. I mean, and it's what's really interesting, Rob. I saw him writing this story, and I didn't pick up on it till 13, 14 years ago in my mom's garage. He had all these boxes of notes. So they were just on different pages. So he wanted to tell this story, and I told my dad's story, which is awesome. My kids, who never really knew I got 4 sons, never really knew my dad, they know their grandpa now.
That's amazing. Cool. That's great that you did that, not only about your dad, but about your sister. Again, for people listening, this is David Dorazi. He's got the book out. It's The In-Between Artist, the story of Tony Dorazi. Definitely check out that book. That's the book we're speaking about today. We did do a previous podcast and radio show about Is Everyone Happy? And that's the story about Kathy O'Dear. That is David's sister. 2 books out, 2 great books, and we're working on a 3rd one. We'll tee that one off at the end of the interview. Just kicking around, speaking about the Disney aspect of that. So actually, you know what? Let's talk about what came first. It was the radio show came first. So let's talk about the radio show, right?
Yeah, the first radio show in Chicago.
So let's talk about that. So he was on the radio teaching kids to draw. I think that's incredible because, I've done these, I've been to Disney, and they have the shows at Disney where you can kind of watch them drawing it, and you draw it yourself. And that's tough as it is for somebody that's not the best drawer in the world. But teaching somebody to draw through a radio is extremely impressive because the visual is in your mind. Do you have any clips or videos or any kind of tapes of that? Go ahead.
That's very interesting you asked. I've really researched it. Even my son, who's in the reality TV business, Vince, he actually researched it too. And I thought it might be in the archives, but at that time they didn't keep any tapes of these shows.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to locate them. But yeah, anyway, that's how my dad got this big job on KHJ. This program director says, how the heck are you going to do that? And he said he had to sit with him and show him. And the guy says, that's a great idea. I mean, but I can't even imagine doing that, man. And it's weird. My youngest son now, Michael, he actually teaches Braille. That's what he does now to kids in school.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's part of the gene he got. I don't know. Where did he get that talent? I mean, yeah, he taught himself. So it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, to teach somebody how to draw off the radio, and he started in 37 when he was on the radio in Chicago. I know, in 37, after Disney, he actually taught kids to draw down there on the radio, and it was the biggest radio program in California. It was crazy. He's at the top. I mean, it was #1 kids radio show on the radio at that time.
So then he goes from Chicago to California, gets married, obviously in Los Angeles, rather, that area, as far as that neck of the woods, doing another radio show there, wins those Emmys. Then he goes back to Disney, correct, David?
Yeah, he goes back to Disney part-time while he's doing other things, correct.
Okay.
And yeah, and basically he did vaudeville. What's interesting, after he got married, and when he finished his first radio show in 37, 38, he ended up doing vaudeville the years of Sinatra and all those other guys across the United States. He covered 38 states. And my mom was his cartoon assistant, and she would sing and she would do the cartooning with him. So if you take a look at the book, I put a few of those photos in there from his scrapbooks, but he saved everything. I mean, he was a big hit.
Right. So then, it's just going back to the Disney aspect. He did work on Dopey as far as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I know they had a big premiere there back when it first came out on video. Was he at that premiere?
I don't recall. I'm not sure, but he probably was. Because he was still around and he was still okay at that time.
Right.
But yeah, he didn't mention it. And I know somebody, when he went back, he did some work on Pluto. I know that was mentioned too by somebody, and I didn't get that in the book. But yeah, he was an amazing guy. I mean, to think out of 1,000 people, I mean, like we talked about, my sister was out of 400 when she got picked for that part. So on Happy Days.
So then, did he ever meet Walt? Was that noted at all?
You know what? He worked. That's right. It's interesting you asked that. I believe he did when he was in New York going to, he was working part-time for them when he was going to school. Yeah, he's going to school back in New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't when they had the World's Fair in New York then? That was in
No, it was when they had the World's Fair in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
But did they have the World's Fair in New York too?
I believe they did, but I don't know. I'm not sure what year it was. Yeah.
I don't know. Regardless, I would have to put that in, but I was just curious off my head. But so obviously it's really impressive. I mean, 5 languages, 2 Emmys, being on the radio in Chicago and Los Angeles, 2 huge markets, 2 of the biggest markets, I should say, in the United States. Obviously working for Disney in productions with Pluto, with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as Dopey. I mean, this is a life you can't really. I'm trying to fit it in the best words I can without, being too dramatic, but it's really incredible. I'll just say that because not too many people do that. And I know his life was shorter than it should have been due to these other issues going on. As we go to the end, what do you hope people learn from our interview today about your dad, Tony Dorazi?
What I hope they learned today about my dad's life, Tony Dorazi, it's like, no matter what challenges you run across in life, especially this being Mental Illness Awareness Month, right, is that you got to just take it as it comes and get back up. There's nothing, if you got the talent, you have the knowledge base there, and you get help. And I want people to realize if you got family and friends that are struggling with mental illness, there's a lot there that if you could help them back in any way, just be there for them, because most of the world's too busy to really take a moment and be part of their lives. I could have stepped out of it like a lot of brothers and sisters and kids, but I realized somebody had to be there to kind of help them. And I think it's really rewarding because I've gotten so much out of life because I just dug in and got the most out of it. It wasn't always fun, but at the same time, there's a lot of good that came out of it. And I've been blessed in a lot of other ways that, it comes back to you. I mean, life isn't easy day to day. not everybody, it's not that easy for, but if you could help them in any way, that's what I want to get out of these books. And I think they'll enjoy them. They're feel-good books about mental illness and somebody that's a Hollywood star. Look at today, so many Hollywood stars are having issues. It wasn't just back then, but now people are talking about. A couple of years ago, the In Between Artists came out when COVID came out. And it's like, before then, you couldn't even talk about mental illness. It was like, hush, hush. Oh, no. Now it's in the headlines every day.
I think a lot of things have changed, obviously, since those past 3 years. But regardless of that, there's a lot of pressure put on these people in Hollywood, whether we like them or not.
Right.
And so we have to take that, into consideration too. In general, there's a lot of pressure on people in life, regardless if they're in Hollywood or not. Things are expensive, inflation, raising kids. There's a lot going on there. So let's be kind and nice to people if we can. Let's end with this. I do want to get this question in, though. So let's ask this because I want to get this in. And speaking about your dad, Tony Dorazi, obviously we've talked a lot about him throughout this conversation, but how do you feel like he impacted you the most?
I think the way my dad impacted me the most, that's one of the best questions I've had in all my podcasts. I think the way it affected me the most, my dad had the best sense of humor in the world. He'd make you laugh. He loved life. You could see why he was just an entertainer. He's so charismatic. I mean, nothing would stop him to try anything. I mean, when he was in his cycles, it was kind of great because he would try anything. It's like, whoa, Dad, and it's like, it kind of made me that way. And I'm really not afraid of pretty much anything in life. And I think sense of humor. And one thing he said in his book, and I wrote this story, he talked about that Bill Goodwin, who was a program director for KHJ. He died at 47. He says he went to the top. He went to the top and he was on Frank Sinatra's comedy show. And he said the biggest thing he had was a smile. And my dad said a smile gets you as far as you want to go. And there's too many people that don't smile, don't realize what a strong feat it is. I mean, anytime I remember reading Zig Ziglar, he said, anytime you go in to make a sales call, and I still live by that today, he says, wipe your face, put a smile on it, because you go in there, you're going to win them over. And hey, it's worked for me for many years.
Many, many years. Again, for people listening, David Dorazi here on Fire Breathing Rob. Definitely check out the books. Before I show the books on my end, let's let you say this to the listeners and the viewers. Where can they get the book? Where can they follow you on any kind of social media or website in general?
You get the book at any Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You get it davidfdorazi.com is my website. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But it's all there, and I think you won't be sorry. They're great stories. So I put it out there because I want to share. I want to make them legends. I was able to make my sister and my dad a legend and enjoy their stories, and hope you'll get a lot out of it.
Again, for people, here's the books. We got them right here. I will be reading these for sure, and I'll be looking forward to David's next book, talking about how to get up in sales. I believe it was 2% in sales. That's where he was kicking butt. He's going to try to teach a lot of people listening to this program next time he comes on about that in general. How's the book going before we cut loose?
It's going well. I've got about a third of it done. It's going well, and I've got it step by step. I'm not going to leave much of anything out. And so anybody that's walking the road to success in sales, it's going to be a golden little apple for you.
Listen, David, life is about selling yourself. Whether it's you're selling a product as you've done, whether it's about getting a job where you have to sell yourself, everything is sales, sales, sales. So this is why we need you to produce this book, because you were kicking butt in sales. And a lot of people listening or not listening do need help in selling themselves to make sure they can achieve greatness if they haven't already. David F. Dorazi here on Fire Breathing Rob. Definitely check out the books, The In-Between Artist and Is Everyone Happy? David, it's a pleasure knowing you. It's a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to our next conversation again.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it. You take care.